Mr. Gaskins. Mr. Gaskins. You can retrieve those documents. Okay, please. Thank you. All right, we're back in session. Ask the jury to come in, please. We're back in session. The jurors are again present. Amanda Hayes is now passed to the state for questions. Who will be examining?
I will.
Okay. Do you have questions?
I do, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead.
Ms. Hayes, I would like to turn your attention to July the 20th, 2011. You recall that that's the night that you went out in the boat with Grant Hayes and disposed of Laura Ackerson's remains.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And it was almost a full moon that night, wasn't it?
I believe so. There were lots of trees everywhere.
Okay. But you went and got into the boat, and you have testified here before this jury that you paddled out into the middle of that creek. Is that right?
That's correct, yes, ma'am.
And then did you continue to paddle, or did you yourself start taking pieces of Laura Ackerson and throwing them into the water?
Ma'am, I never saw anything.
Okay, how big was that boat, ma'am?
I believe everyone witnessed it. I don't know for sure what the measurements of it are.
You were in the boat.
That's correct. I was at the back of the boat.
Who else was in the boat?
Grant Hayes?
Okay. And were there any coolers in the boat?
No, ma'am, not at all.
What could you see in the boat?
Whenever I got in the boat, I just saw black plastic.
Okay. And then there were 2 oars in that boat. Did you use both of the oars or just one?
Just one. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
And so you were paddling. How long did it take you to paddle over to the middle of the creek?
I don't recollect the time frame.
You said when you first got out that you and Grant wanted to go one way, but the boat started going the other way. Is that right?
I said whenever we pushed the boat was facing going toward the right, but we wanted to go toward the left. So instead of trying to turn around, we just rode the boat backwards. The boat kept rocking, and I kept telling Grant to be still. He was going to flip the boat over.
This was about what time at night?
I don't recall exactly. It was dark.
And when you got out to the left, because you couldn't turn the boat around,
Yes, ma'am.
what did you do?
I just paddled, and the boat was filling up with water, and so I started bailing the water out of the boat. While we were trying, I was paddling with one oar and bailing the water out at the same time.
What were you doing out in the boat that night? What was your plan?
I didn't have a plan. I was just doing whatever he told me to do.
And when you started bailing out the water from the boat, what was Grant Hayes doing?
I honestly don't know. He was behind me, and I didn't see him. I was just trying to keep the boat in the center, not going into the grassy areas. I heard animals all around me, and that was my primary focus, was to keep the boat from sinking, being flipped over, and keeping it away from the grassy areas.
When you testified, when you talked on direct, when you testified before this jury earlier today, you said it took a really, really long time.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It seemed like it took forever. Yes, ma'am, it sure did.
And it took forever for you to paddle and keep the boat from going into the grass area?
Yes, ma'am. Just the whole experience of being on the boat, that's correct.
Ms. Hayes, isn't it true that when you were out in the boat, that you were taking Laura Ackerson's remains and throwing
Ma'am,
them
I
over
never
the
saw
side of
anything.
Wait till the end of my question, please, ma'am. isn't it true that you were taking Laura Ackerson's remains, which included her torso and her head and parts of her leg, and throwing them over the side of the boat?
Again, I never saw anything that was going on behind me.
You indicated that you were in the back of the boat, but you couldn't see what was going on behind you?
I was facing toward the water. That's correct.
Well, what could you hear? What could you smell?
I was listening. I heard the animals, and honestly, I didn't smell anything.
You didn't smell anything?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall making a statement on a prior occasion that you were, it smelled so bad that it was making your stomach roil?
No, ma'am, I don't recall that.
Now, before you went out in the boat that night, you had already dumped the acid at that point, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. Or no, ma'am, that the next morning is when that happened.
Okay. So you'd purchased or been involved in the purchase of the acid, but you hadn't dumped it yet.
I was not involved in the purchase. I just drove him there.
And before you went out in the boat that night, you asked your sister for some clothing, is that right?
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
Did you ask her for a pair of shoes as well?
Not until the next day.
And that was because the shoes that you had worn out on the boat, along with the clothing that you had worn out on the boat, you had driven Grant Hayes, and y'all had gone to an apartment complex and dumped that in a dumpster, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. I drove him and he dumped it. Yes, that's correct.
Did you tell your sister why you weren't giving her clothes back?
No, ma'am. She didn't want to know anything at all.
Because she knew that you were about the business of disposing of Laura Ackerson, is why she didn't ask for those clothes back. Isn't that right?
I'm sure that's correct.
And those clothes you had to throw them away because they were soaked, weren't they?
They were not soaked. I threw them away because Grant asked me for them. He told me to give them to him.
When you finished going out in the boat, now you said that Candace, your niece, now you hadn't seen her in a number of years,
Approximately 2 years. Yes, ma'am. That's
Okay.
correct.
and she came over that night and you let her know that you were going out in the boat.
Yes, ma'am.
She led her to believe you were going out fishing.
That's correct.
And you asked her for money,
Yes, ma'am. I asked her to repay money that I had lent to her.
and you told her that you wanted as much as you could get in cash.
That's correct.
And she left to go to the ATM to get the money. Now, were you back in the house when she got back, or you already gone out in the boat?
I don't recall. I had not gone out in the boat yet, but I don't recall if I was in the house or not.
Before you went out in the boat, you testified that you were outside and you were, I believe you used the term watching out.
Yes, he asked me to stand right by the road. He could see me, and just to watch to make sure nobody came down where he was at.
And where was he?
Just a few yards away from me.
And where were you standing?
I was standing close to the road.
And when you were watching out, where were you looking for people to come from?
I was just watching the road, both directions, across the street at my sister's house.
And so you were basically standing by the road, looking up and down the road to see if anybody was coming?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was because at that point that you or Grant were taking Laura's body across the street, is that right?
No, ma'am. I didn't see Grant carry anything. Whatever he had was already in position. I don't know exactly what he was doing down there, but he was down at the boat area. He didn't carry anything across the street that I saw. He had already done whatever he was doing.
And that was before it had gotten dark at that point.
Yes, ma'am. It was kind of dusky.
So, Ms. Hayes, you stood by the roadside and looked out to see if any cars were coming. Did you ever have to call out to Grant Hayes and let him know that somebody was coming?
No, ma'am, not at all.
How long did you stand out there keeping a lookout?
I really don't.
You don't recall that either?
No, ma'am, I don't.
You had testified earlier about that Monday night that Shelton came home, that you started talking with him about his business. You talked with him about wild pigs.
Yes, ma'am.
You talked with him about whether or not they would eat human remains.
Yes, ma'am, I did.
You talked with him about alligators.
Yes, ma'am.
You talked to him about whether or not alligators would eat human remains.
I don't remember exactly the entire conversation, but yes, to generalize, yes, I was asking him different questions. Had just found out, and he was my first source, and I was just asking him because I figured if anyone knew, that he would at this point.
Okay, so let me get this straight. You had just found out, according to your testimony,
Yes, ma'am.
that Laura Ackerson was with you there in Texas and that you needed to dispose of her body.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And your response to that was to wait until your nephew got there and ask him if wild pigs ate human remains, if alligators ate human remains. What did he tell you? Did he tell you whether or not wild pigs would eat human remains?
Yes, ma'am, he did say that pigs would eat anything. Yes, ma'am, he did.
Did he tell you that alligators would eat human remains?
I don't really recall what he said about the alligators, honestly. I know that my sister had told me before that that they did go alligator hunting, and I don't really recall. But she said that they had gone over in that area.
When you say in that area, you meant across the street.
Correct, yes,
You asked him
ma'am.
if there were alligators across the street.
I already knew there were alligators because my sister had told me many stories about the boys, and they've lived there for many years, so.
You knew there were alligators in that area before you got in the Dodge Durango and traveled across the country to your sister's house in Texas, didn't you?
Yes, ma'am, but that was not at all why I was going to my sister's.
And so on this occasion, on Monday night, the 18th of July of 2011, you asked your nephew Shelton, as soon as he comes home, about the pigs and about the alligators. Did you question him about alligator hunting?
I really don't recall.
Do you recall asking him where in the creek across the way the alligators were?
I know that he had said something that they don't usually come right there because of the people. So he had told me that they were way far into the creek. My two nephews, they go in that creek all the time. I had never ever been to that creek ever in my entire life before the 20th of July.
So this was the source of information that you had about that creek and alligator hunting and whether or not there were alligators in that creek.
Yes, just from my nephews and my sister. That's
And
correct.
What time are you having this conversation with your nephew Shelton?
It's in the middle of the night, probably about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. And he told you, in fact, that the alligators in that creek really didn't stay close to that area, that you had to go further down where there wasn't so much development. Is that right?
He just said further down. He didn't really say how far down. He just said because of the people, they didn't come in that area.
And do you recall asking him about that creek and the spillway and exactly if that creek crossed back over the road or under the road further down?
I don't recall asking him that. Grant may have asked him, but I don't recall.
And on that Monday night, when you spoke with Shelton, did you ask him anything about acid, or was it all about
No.
pigs and alligators? And
I just asked him because that was the type of work he was in, and that's the only thing I asked him. I wasn't trying to involve him. I was just trying to obtain some information.
You were trying to get the information from him so that you wouldn't have to involve him in disposing of Laura Ackerson's
I did
remains.
not want to involve anybody in anything. I was very, very upset that I had been put in this position.
Now you knew at this location at Skinner Lane that there was a hog pen that was located there at Skinner Lane.
I didn't know until my sister pointed it out and identified what it was.
Well, you had gotten there on the morning of Monday the 18th, is that right?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And your testimony before this jury is that on the morning of the 19th, that you told your sister, or that you had some discussion with your sister about the fact that Laura was dead.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And at that time, you told her that you had done it.
That's correct, yes, ma'am.
And you asked for her help to help get rid of Laura's remains.
Yes, ma'am, can I explain?
Sure.
I was doing that because Grant told me to tell her that. It was not my idea to tell her. It was his idea for me to tell her and what to tell her because he felt like that was the only way she was going to help us. And at that point, that was the only solution he had.
And did she help you?
Very basically.
Okay. And she helped you by, at that point, showing you the hog pen?
She helped by keeping the children safe.
Okay. Well, I want to talk with you and understand, Ms. Hayes, about when you tell your sister that Laura Ackerson is dead, that you've done it, and that you want help disposing of her body. I want to understand from that point forward what you did there at her house.
Well, first of all, I didn't ask her with help to dispose the body. I asked her for help for ideas. I was trying to have her to help us with solutions. I wasn't asking her to exactly be involved in it physically.
You were asking her for ideas about how to dispose of Laura's body?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you ask her?
Basically what you've heard here already.
No, what did you ask her?
I needed help.
Okay. Did you ask her, how do we get rid of a body?
I don't remember exactly the terminology, but basically
Okay.
that's the general.
And what did she tell you?
She came up with a few ideas, and
What were her ideas of how to get rid of
she
Laura's
is
body?
the one that suggested the septic system in the back. She pointed out the hog pen. Grant had asked her questions about the well, and he ultimately had the idea about the acid. And later that afternoon, he came up with the idea about the boat.
So the three of you eventually are sitting there talking about ideas about how to get rid of Laura's body.
That's correct.
And your sister, who you've described as being like a mother to you,
Yes, ma'am.
suggests to you throwing her body in the septic tank?
She just pointed out that there was a septic system there. She didn't go into detail what to do with it. She just pointed out that it was there.
So the question was, how can we get rid of this body? And she points to a septic tank.
She says that there is a septic system in the back.
Well, and you actually walk with her over to the septic tank, don't you?
That's correct, with her and Grant.
Do you look into the septic tank?
No, ma'am, there is a bunch of boards and concrete and all kinds of debris and stuff on top of it. It would have been impossible to even, it was not even plausible in any form.
That wasn't going to work out, throwing her in the septic tank.
Definitely not.
The hog pen? Whose idea was it to go to the hog pen?
It was just something that she pointed out.
Okay, and again, tell me how that happens. When you say, we want to get rid of this body, how do we do it? How do you end up at the hog pen?
I honestly don't have an answer for that question. I was just following them. We were all just kind of brainstorming. I don't think there was very much rational thinking at this point at all from anybody.
What I'm trying to understand, Ms. Hayes, and to ask you about is, you've indicated you go to your sister and say, I have brought the body of the mother of these two boys that I brought to your house. I need help in disposing of this body. And y'all begin a brainstorming session to come up with solutions and ideas.
Well, first of all, I did not intentionally take a dead body to my sister's house. It was a position that I was put in involuntarily, totally against my will. I would have never, ever, ever, ever in a gazillion years done such a thing. Ever.
You would have never taken a body to your sister's house to dispose of.
Never.
But yet, when you were asked to help get rid of the body, your response is to sit down and, first of all, ask your nephew for ideas about alligators and pigs, wild pigs, then to talk to your sister about throwing her into a septic tank, go into a hog pen and doing something.
Honestly, ma'am, I wasn't really asked. I was told.
Told
He didn't
what?
ask me to help him. He told me I had to help him.
When you were going through this brainstorming session with your sister and with Grant Hayes, at some point you all settled on the idea of acid.
I think that Grant came up with that idea and we just let him go with it. We weren't going to argue, dispute, or participate in any more. When he felt like he came up with a solution,
You weren't going to participate anymore when he came up with the acid solution?
whenever he came up with an idea of what he wanted to do.
Okay, and what was the acid idea?
Honestly, I don't know 100%.
Okay, what percent do you know?
I just know that he said he needed was going to get some acid. What or how he intended on using it, I don't know. He didn't share that information with me.
And so at the point that you settle on the acid solution, you leave Lily and the two boys with your sister and then drive Grant to the Home Depot to purchase the acid.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
You knew you were going to purchase acid.
I knew that I was taking him to Home Depot. What he was going to purchase, I am not 100%.
What did you think you were going to purchase at that point?
Well, I knew that he had mentioned acid, but again, I don't know 100% what he did even purchase.
You were part of the discussion with your sister when you asked for directions to the Home Depot.
Correct, yes, ma'am.
You were present when there was discussion about Home Depot being a place that sold acid.
Correct, yes, ma'am.
And so after you had that discussion, you borrow your nephew's truck and drive Grant to the Home Depot.
Correct.
Were you still in the truck when he came out and unloaded the acid and put it in the truck?
He put it in the back of the truck, and I was in the front of the truck. That's correct.
Oh, so again, this was to your back. You
Yes,
couldn't see
ma'am.
that?
That's correct.
And when did you realize there was acid in the truck?
Whenever he asked me to get rid of it the next day.
How much money did you give him before you went into the Home Depot?
I don't recall. Whatever I got from the ATM, whatever that was.
But you didn't go into the Home Depot, you sat out in the truck.
Yes, ma'am, I did.
What time of day was this when you were sitting out
It
in the
was
truck?
it was early.
10 or so in the morning?
That sounds about right.
How long did you sit out in the truck?
I really don't recall. Long enough for him to go in, come out, ask me to make the phone call, for him to go back in, make his purchases, and come back out.
Well, the video that we've seen showed 30 minutes on that second entry. Does that make sense to you, that it was at least 30 minutes on that second time?
That sounds about right. He wasn't in there very long the first time.
And during that time, were there people coming and going at the Home Depot?
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, it was open for business,
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
pretty full parking lot.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And before that, when you went over to the ATM, there were other people using the ATM and in the area?
Honestly, I was in such my own little, honestly, I wasn't paying attention to the world around me. I was encaged in my own, just trying to get what he needed me to get, and I wasn't paying attention to the outside world.
When you left the Home Depot, did you drive him back to your aunt's house? I'm sorry, your sister's house?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And do you know about what time it was that you got back?
No, ma'am, I don't. I know that it was early morning because I spoke to her as soon as I woke up from bed, so.
Did you see Grant in the area of the hog pen with the acid?
No, ma'am, I didn't.
Ms. Hayes, the night before, the Tuesday night, the 19th, when you were out in the boat with Grant Hayes,
Yes, ma'am.
you indicated that when you got back that did you immediately borrow the truck and go to dump
No,
the
ma'am.
clothes?
I went into the house and got the kids because my sister had to leave to go pick up my nephew from work.
Had you taken the clothes that you had used to
Yes,
go out
ma'am.
the boat ride, you taken them off before
Yes,
you went
ma'am.
and picked up the children out from the house?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Where did you take the children when you went in the house?
I was just in the house with the children.
Okay, so you went in the house where they were?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
What had you done with the clothes at that point?
Grant had told me to give him the clothes whenever I got off of the boat.
And had you had a change of clothes that you were able to change into?
I still had my shorts and t-shirt on underneath. The clothes that my sister had given me were clean. Again, I did not touch anything. I did not see anything.
And when you went inside, your sister at that point had to go leave to pick up your nephew, is that right?
That's correct.
And did they come back after a short period of time?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And that's and Grant came in a little bit later?
They all kind of got back at the same time. Yes, that's correct.
And so at that point, is that when you went to dump the clothes into
Yes, ma'am. All the trash, whatever the trash was, I don't know. All the trash that he wanted to throw out. Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Well, was it in the pickup truck?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And so you drove him over, did you know right where the dumpster was, or did
No,
you have
ma'am.
to drive around a little bit before you could find the dumpster?
My sister had given us directions to the apartment. It was an area that I was not familiar with. I had never been to that area before, so I had to find the location. That's correct.
That was right down Skinner Lane, is that right?
It was not off of Skinner Lane. It was still a little ways away.
Okay, so she had to give you directions, and you had to follow those directions.
Yes, ma'am.
Once you got to the apartment complex, you had to drive around until you found a dumpster.
Yes, ma'am.
And when you got there to where the dumpster was, did you get out and help throw
No,
the clothes
ma'am.
away?
I stayed in the car. At this point, Grant was acting very, very panicky and just very panicky, kind of scary.
So he gets out of the car. Is that, again, something that's to your back?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you didn't turn around and see what he was doing?
No, ma'am, I did not.
And when he gets out of the car, you're in the car alone,
That's correct.
still in the driver's seat?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Keys still in the ignition?
He actually took the keys. Every time he would get out of the car, he would take the keys from me. And he had the phone every time he would leave me. I never had the phone at all.
When you got back from dumping the clothes at the apartment complex dumpster, what did you do?
I believe I went in and I took a shower, and the kids were already in bed at that time, so I went in and took a shower and got ready and went to bed.
You remember the photographs that have been shown
Yes,
that were
ma'am.
taken on the iPod?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And do you remember there were videos that were taken?
That's probably when I was in the shower. Yes, ma'am.
You didn't recognize your voice in the background of those videos?
My
talking
niece-
about, honey, don't the boys fight over who gets to change the poopy diaper? You didn't recognize your voice saying that?
No, ma'am, I didn't. I'm not going to swear that I didn't, but I'm just telling you that I took a shower at that time. So I also know that my sister, my niece, and my daughter and I all had the same voice. We all sound exactly alike, so.
And Is it your testimony here that you were not the one that was filming?
No, ma'am, I was not filming.
How long did you stay up that night after you had been out in the boat with Grant Hayes, then gone to the dumpster and dumped the clothes, then come back and take a shower? How long did you stay out there and visit with your sister and with your nephew? Was he part of the visiting there that night?
Dalton, I'm not 100% sure if they were both there or not. In regards to how long did I stay out there to visit, I mean, I really don't recall. Did I visit with them? Yes. Was it 10 minutes, 30 minutes? I don't recall.
Do you recall if it was about midnight, the time that was shown on the iPod? Does that sound about right?
I know that my sister went to pick Dalton up around 10 o'clock. Whenever she got back, I would say it's a little after 10. We went and took the trash, so that's probably closer to 11 when we got back. I took a shower, so around midnight sounds about right.
Speaking of photographs, you've talked to the jury about going to the hotel room.
Yes, ma'am.
On the way back from Texas.
Yes, ma'am.
And where was that hotel located?
I don't recall exactly the area. I'm not from this area, so I don't know my way around, but it was before we got to Kinston. I know that there is a Bojangles right close by there. Other than that, I can't tell you the town. I don't know.
North Carolina somewhere?
Yes, ma'am. It was relatively close to Kinston.
And you had left Texas on Wednesday morning, is that right?
It was afternoon.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And the U-Haul you left in Texas. You didn't pull that on the way back. Is that
Yes,
right?
sir. He took the U-Haul back there.
And was that dropped off on your way out? Or
Yes,
was that
ma'am.
already done?
No,
On the way out?
on the way out. Yes, ma'am.
And what time was it when you got to the hotel in Kinston or near Kinston?
We left Wednesday afternoon. It was late Thursday evening. I don't recall exactly a time. I know it was after 5 o'clock, though, for sure.
And so it's the photographs that are of Grant and Gentle and little Grant in the bathtub, of the boys jumping on the bed, of you and Grant and Lily and Gentle laying on the bed. If they show 717, 803, does that sound about right to you?
Yes, ma'am. That sounds about.
On your way back from Texas, do you recall stopping at a Cracker Barrel?
We stopped at a Cracker Barrel a couple times. I know we stopped one time and ate. I want to say that was on the way down there, though, to give the kids a break from being in the car and stuff. Cracker Barrel is one of Grant's favorite restaurants, and so, yes, ma'am.
And do you recall while you were there renting a book on disc?
Grant would rent books because you could rent them at one location and return them at another location, so that was something Grant frequently did.
Were you awake in the car on the ride back?
I tried to sleep a lot.
Okay. Well, the book on disc, that was something that was played in the car, is that right?
Honestly, I really don't know. I mean, my mind, I was very preoccupied, I have to tell you.
Do you remember that the name of the book was Fatal Error?
No, ma'am, I don't. I'm not familiar with the book at all.
So is that another time when you were kind of in your own world, not aware of anything that was happening
Yes, ma'am,
around
I
you?
was very much in my own world, praying and just trying to get us to safety, I would say the majority of the time.
When you woke up on the morning of the 22nd of July, where did you go?
What day is that?
It's the Friday.
Friday. Grant asked me to take him to his attorney's office
And where was that?
in Kinston.
And which attorney was that?
Mr. Ford Coley?
And so, did you go there that afternoon?
We went there that morning.
And how long were you there?
A long time.
Hours?
Yes, ma'am.
And there were some photographs that were shown of the boys in what appears to be an office. Is that at the lawyer's office?
I didn't take those photographs. It looks like it could be.
Is that your camera
Yes, ma'am. It was
Okay.
our camera.
that was in your purse?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you see the photographs when they were shown here today?
When they were shown on the
Or
screen
other
was
day?
the first time that I had ever seen them. I hadn't seen them before that.
Well, were you able to recognize the background as being at the lawyer's office?
It's possible,
Do you remember what the lawyer's office looked like that you spent hours in?
not specifically, no.
Where did you go when you left the lawyer's office?
We went to Grant's parents' house.
And once you got there, it was that night that the police came and actually
That's
executed
correct.
the search warrants, is that right?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And you remember when that happened, that you actually went down to the Kinston Police Station with the Raleigh detectives? is
Yes,
that
ma'am,
right?
that's correct.
But you didn't ride in the same car as Grant going down there,
No,
did you?
ma'am, I did not.
So it was you, was there more than one police officer that you rode with down to the police
No,
station?
ma'am, it was just myself and another police officer. That's correct.
And how long a trip was that, from Grant's parents' house to the police station?
Just a few minutes, like
And-
10 minutes maybe, or less.
And so during that ride, it's you and, it was a Detective Bortney that you rode with?
I don't, honestly, I don't know. If that's who they say it is, then I take your word for it.
And you knew that Grant was in another police car?
Yes, ma'am.
And so you got down to the police station and they took photographs of you, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, at that particular location, I don't recall the photographs. I do recall them doing fingerprints and the DNA and doing searches. I think they did the photographs once on the 25th.
You don't recall that they were doing photographs?
No,
of
ma'am,
you?
I don't remember photographs that day.
And how long did that whole process take?
Again, I'm not 100% sure, but an hour or so.
And when you left the police station, you again left with Detective Courtney, is that right?
Correct, yes, ma'am.
And was it, again, just the two of you in the police car?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And he took you back to Grant's parents' house?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
The following day, the 23rd, which was that Saturday,
Yes, ma'am.
in terms of that day, what did you do?
Honestly, I really don't know. At this point, I'm totally numb. I promise you, I really don't recall any specific things on that day. I know during those next little bit, I kept trying to get a hold of Shay and have her come. I was really wanting to get Lily to her and be where I could. My intention was to be able to leave with Shay and Lily. That was my intention, was to get away.
Well, do you remember getting in a truck with Grant's parents and heading towards Raleigh?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay. Well, who was in the truck with you?
Grant's parents and myself.
And where did you go?
We were on our way to the apartment here in Raleigh.
And what were you planning to do when you got to the apartment?
I was planning on getting the boys some stuff. They were out of clothes. I was just trying to get them some stuff to make sure they were taken care of.
Did you ever make it to the apartment?
No, ma'am. Something with his truck broke down, and we were not able to continue.
And so, the following day, so you returned to the Grant's parents' house?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Now, Grant's parents' house is located at 1505 Holman Street, is that right?
That's correct.
And you testified earlier to this jury that you were planning to move to Kinston, is
Yes,
that
ma'am,
right?
that's correct.
And when were you planning to move to Kinston?
Before we went to my sister's, we had planned on moving that Saturday. After, whenever we made the plans to go to my sister's, I was assuming we were moving the following weekend. We had just postponed it 1 week.
And your plan in moving to Kinston was that you were going to run a daycare center?
That was an option that had been given to us. We hadn't 100% made the decision yet, but it was an option.
Well, where were you planning to move in Kinston?
His parents had told us that we could have the entire downstairs and they would take the upstairs.
So the 1505 Holman Street was where you were planning
That's
to move
correct.
to?
His parents were wanting to eventually go to a smaller place and just let us have the whole house.
Ms. Holden, it's about 5:15. I think we'll stop for the evening. Okay. Ms. Hayes, you can stand down. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks, I think we'll stop for the evening. If you haven't heard it all, keep an open mind. Don't formally express any opinion about the good or innocence of the defendant or any matter in controversy. Be careful about your conduct. Follow my previous instructions. Let me check one thing. Ms. Van is going to put a message on the number that you have in the morning, so that about 8 or so. So we'll to give you some direction about what to do, and we'll just follow that direction. Y'all have her number, her cell phone number. If you're okay, if you need to call her directly, call her directly. But just follow those instructions, and if it's not clear, I'll make sure that she calls each of you individually and tells you what to do. I mean, I hope it's going to look exactly like it looks right now, but and so we can just move on. If not, we'll. But I want to make sure that we don't create either dangerous situation for anybody, and also I'm not going to ask all of you to come unless I'm reasonably satisfied that you can all get here, because if one of you doesn't get here and the other 14 does, we can't do anything. That's all of you get here. So I want to make sure that we are in a situation in which we can reasonably believe that all of you will be able to get here. Thank you very much, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. All right, the jurors have left. Mr. Gaskins, can you give the clerk a number that you can be reached at in the event there's some confusion about what time we're going to start? Okay. Ms. Godwin, before you leave tonight, can you give that information to the clerk so there won't be any confusion about that? And could you all share numbers, some kind of number, so that you can tell each other if one of you hears before the other?
Absolutely.
All right. I don't want the jury to have to wait for anybody, including me or y'all. All right. Yes.
Your Honor, I was just wondering if we should have, we have rebuttal witnesses, if we can have them ready to go tomorrow morning, or if there is some sort of forecast to the schedule.
Do you know, do you have an estimate as to the extent of your evidence?
There will be no further witnesses.
Okay, all right. in view of that, if you intend to call rebuttal witnesses, have them available in the morning, please. All right. Anything else? There being not, sheriff will be in recess until 9:30 in the morning. Thank you.